Welcome, everyone. It's Thursday afternoon, probably getting late in your work day or whatever you're doing. But we're doing these a lot lately, I guess, in the last 2 days anyway, because Arkansas's had, hot potato quick third and fourth transfer portal commitments. Really in the last 24 hours, less than that. When you look at the timing between Khalif Battle on Wednesday, that was almost a simultaneous commitment for the third out of the portal for the Razorbacks with Anthony Black, the all SEC freshman guard, who's, heading into the draft. We all thought that was expected. But today, Jeremiah Davenport, a 6'7" wing from Cincinnati. This guy faced the Razorbacks a couple of years ago in the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City, the title game. There was four teams. You had you automatically were in the semifinal round. It was your opening round, and then there was a title game the next day. And Arkansas defeated Kansas State, played Cincinnati. Davenport was a guy that Arkansas had marked down as a guy that they were going to have to stop. And it was his highest scoring season. It turned out, this was a November game 2 years ago, but it turned out to be his highest scoring season in 4 years with the Bearcats. And Otis Tony, I'll never forget it, matched up with him. That's when we really started to see Otis take the reins as at times an elite defender. Davenport didn't scratch in that game, and only four shot attempts in what turned into be a good game. Arkansas ends up wins the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City. But Davenport, the prior game, there was a ranked Illinois team Arkansas fans thought they'd probably see in those finals. Cincinnati got the upset there, and Davenport, I think, 19 points. And, he averaged 13 and a half points that season. The prior year as a sophomore, he was a double figure score at over 11. And so this past year, if you're looking at him numerically, statistically, his role, even though his minutes were about the same, he only started 15 games as a senior, averaged 9.1 points a game in just about 26 minutes. His efficiency as a shooter, this is a guy in his career at Cincinnati over 100 games, over 1,000 points. He's basically made just over 200 3-pointers through his career. So if you average that out, it's about 50 makes per season. But if you really look at the last two seasons, that the bulk of his three makes came in the last 2 years. So he sort of evolved more as a more and more volume guy. Jeremiah Davenport from three, he's good as a spot up guy. A lot of times spot up is not just about catching to the next pass. It's moving to an opening where the ball's moving either inside and out around the perimeter, giving a guy a chance to make a swing pass to you or skip pass over the defense. So moving off the ball and offsetting or getting to spots is important as a spot up shooter, because not always are you working in two-man game or off screens. You're just reading ball movement and position of defenders. So this is where I think this guy brings something to the table for a team that's been really bad, Arkansas. When you look at 3-point shooting the last 2 years, not a lot of options there. And you look at this portal recruiting, and there's the last two pickups. When you look at Battle, who's a volume and efficient 3-point shooter. I mentioned Davenport over 200 threes in 4 years at Cincinnati, but he was roughly 35% 3-point shooter. So on that kind of volume, that's a respectable percentage. And at 6'7", he's a guy that can shoot over defenders. This is not a super athletic guy. He's not really a shot creator off the bounce. I'm not going to compare him to Stanley Amudi other than to say you've got a wing with some size. Amudi was about 6'6". This guy listed 6'7", maybe a little longer. Stanley Amudi was not a big-time shot creator off the bounce. A lot of spot up and just getting to spots, but he did have a mid-post game and some stuff he could do. When I look at Davenport, not as much shot, again, not a shot creator in the same kind of a vein as maybe an Amudi, but can be effective shooting from distance. If you pick and roll, if you run pick and pop and pick and roll with him, he plays that stuff pretty well, and he's fairly efficient there. I like the little I've seen of him shooting in transition. That's another thing. Arkansas, we thought this last Arkansas team was going to be excellent in transition. It wasn't always. And part of the problem was you didn't have spacing running down the floor with guys flaring out to the wings. You didn't have shooters. You didn't have shooters for that. And so Arkansas kind of botched up. A lot of times, what you saw in half court was problematic in other areas. And guys like this can maybe help you even in transition, even though he's not a burner and one of those guys that's a real downhill kind of threat in other scenarios. But there are areas where he can help. And you look at now the portal. The important part's not just to mention the player. What does it mean when you look at the roster? Arkansas came into today with a spot open. And this was a guy that, basically circled back around for Arkansas coaches, one that's kind of been under the radar. The coaches were, like they are most days, were hot and heavy doing Zooms, a lot of stuff going on recruiting wise. Yesterday, this one came around as a commitment to the staff last night. It didn't take long today. I think it was around 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. or so that the announcement came out. And so this is the fourth one out of the portal. I mentioned Battle, talked a little bit about him, a lot more about him yesterday, a little bit in this so far. We know Minifield, the 6'1" freshman transfer from Washington, was the first off the board. We know Arkansas got Trayman Mark, who's more of a slasher. There's a little bit of craft in even not getting all the way to the rim, getting into the paint, some pull-up stuff there, but really, not as much a floor spacer and a floor stretcher and a knockdown shooter. Minifield's also a guy who was a big scorer coming into college, and both he and Mark average around 10 points a game, but you could see at the end of the year their offense and their offensive numbers pick up. But I think there's some mixed signals here defensively, and I thought Arkansas, even though it was a top 20 defensive team last year defensively, when you look at efficiency according to KenPom, they've been closer in those Elite 8 years to the top 10. One was 10th, the other was 11th. Last year it was hovering around 20, in between that 15 and 20. Not a huge difference, but some of that was in the backcourt, I thought. Arkansas was less consistent defensively, both front court and backcourt. But we're talking about backcourt right now because that's where Arkansas's, these four players, that's what they are. They're backcourt players. At best, this pickup today at 6'7" is a 3-4 combo, but I think he's more wing, right? Whereas I think a guy like Jordan Walsh, we're going to talk a little bit here, is truly a guy that can blend wing and that small four because of some of his not only length, athleticism, but his defensive instincts. I don't know with a grad transfer at this point who to this point you would look at and say, well, this is a guy that's a versatile defender, but there may be some advantages there when you do play small ball with him as your small four. He's not a bad rebounder, over 4 a game, not great, but when you consider he only plays 26 minutes a game. But I'm going back to the collective class so far in the backcourt, Arkansas has addressed perimeter shooting and perimeter threat, specifically with Battle, and I think this guy to some degree. I think Arkansas also, when I look at Minifield, I think we're going to see more and more because he's a very young player. With his length at 6'1", he looks and plays a little longer and bigger because of that length and quickness. He's got quickness and some athleticism that are needle pushers, and I think that he's a guy that can be an offensive. I'm not going to say a force, but more of an offensive contributor or producer, even in year 2. Given it depends on his minutes and role, but could be that kind of guy that evolves to being more than you thought he might be, looking just back at last season's numbers. And so sometimes when you look at stats and those things, you also want to pay attention to the player's growth. What did they do to even finish up the season last year? And I think when I looked at Mark and Minifield, even offensively, I think those guys showed a little bit more late than what their averages would tell you. And then again with Battle, that's a plus. I mean, that's a volume score. 18 points a game at Temple, led the Owls. This guy's capable of scoring. You see the dip, but he's got historically he's been a guy that can score in double figures. Not sure exactly what all was going on at Cincinnati this year for him to be under 10 points a game. But he'll be maybe a per minute guy, and we'll see how he's used and how he fits in. But Arkansas's now addressed when we start talking about, well, who's left Arkansas? What do we know? We know Kamani exhausted. He was the first guy out because his eligibility was exhausted after Arkansas played its final game. Mikael Mitchell's the lone Razorback to this point that's gone in the portal. That's 2 players. Well, let's call it even because Arkansas signed 2 5-stars in the early period in November. Bayfall, the big man, the center, out of Denver, 6'11" forward center. Layden Blocker, 6'3" combo guard, 6'2", 6'3" combo guard out of the Little Rock area. So you had backcourt and front court in that signing class. All right, numbers are even now. So now let's look at what's happened so far with Arkansas players announcing that they're going into the draft. You had first off the board Nick Smith Jr., then it was Devo Davis, then it was Ricky Council. Yesterday it was Anthony Black. So that was the vast majority of your production on the team, let alone, just about everything you had in that backcourt. That was it. That's your backcourt. And so that's why we see Arkansas with these backcourt moves. Jordan Walsh is the one guy that I've been saying over and over again. I believe he's going to publicly declare for the NBA draft. I'm not going to go into specifics about what he's actually done to this point, other than I fully believe he's already preparing for that process. And we'll see what his announcement, when and if it comes, if it is specific to leaving the door open for a return. That's what Devo Davis has done. That's the next part of this analysis. Since we talked about 4 commitments in, 4 players publicly announced in for the draft, and then the 2 departing frontliners, Mitchell, Mikael Mitchell, and Kamani Johnson, and the 2 high school signees. That's 6 for 6. So Arkansas now, with Davenport's announcement today, commitment, that means the numbers are right at where they need to be. If everything's paused and stopped right now, and this is what everything was going to look like moving forward for 23-24. So Arkansas is not over, they're not under, they're at the number. Jordan Walsh becomes, in my opinion, the next guy that's going to enter that draft to give Arkansas 5 players from this last team and this last roster into the draft. So we'll see when and how and if that's announced. But either way, I think it's a reality. And so look, this pickup today, I think, helps. It's similar size, not the same length, but there's length with Davenport that's plus. He looks long in the arms at that 6'7". Not the same kind of player, certainly, but there is some size there on the perimeter as a wing. And because I think his rebounding numbers have been decent relative to his minutes, I think there's some ways you could look at that. And am I going to compare him defensively to a Jordan Walsh? Am I saying he's a replacement for a Jordan Walsh if Jordan Walsh leaves? I'm not saying that exactly. I'm saying if you look at the other guys Arkansas got out of the portal at this point, 6'1", 6'5", and 6'5", this guy's size-wise anyway, and the ability to maybe get on the glass a little bit, maybe is a, the idea might be that he could fill that role or a similar role for a small 4 or a big wing that you got with Jordan. And so it's not the same player. I'm not saying that. And then again, you've got Trevor Brazile, who was the first to announce that he was coming back. You saw other players like Jalen Graham on that front line announce that he was returning. We don't know about Mekhi Mitchell yet. He's made announcements in neither direction. I'm staying, I'm going. When his twin got in the portal and he didn't, that may seem odd because they've been together forever. Twins have stuck together in basketball as long as they can. And a lot of times, even in the pro level, I think there have been occasions where they tried to work it out and get on the same team. It's happened. And so we'll see if these guys are not going to be together for the first time. Does that mean Mekhi's back at Arkansas? The Razorbacks are still recruiting big men in the portal. There are more visitors coming in. I've had a story and an article ready to go about one player coming in since Monday, and I've sat on that. I've been asked to, let's keep a lid on some things here, and we'll see what happens here in the next few days. But there's also, when we talk about frontline recruiting, Hunter Dickinson's the number one. Most of these outlets out here that look at this stuff and rank the portal prospects, because that's what spring recruiting is now. Bet you didn't know the spring signing period for high school started today, because it's not getting a lot of attention. The portal is king right now, and Arkansas is working the front line. When you lose a Kamani, Mikael added depth. Kamani added depth. They brought different things. Kamani was an enforcer of the twins. Mikael was the enforcer when you're starting to talk about using physicality and playing a certain way. And Arkansas at times lacked maybe some of that toughness at times, even having those 2 guys for matchup reasons. Just sometimes matchups are a little different. And so, Trevor Brazile is a skill stretch 4. There's positives with him defensively, rim protection, some other things, and quickness. And he's a guy that can get steals. For his length, his plus length and his size, he gets steals. And he's got great anticipation. Jalen Graham's been mostly an offensive guy from what I've seen and what I've observed. He's blocked a few shots and had his moments, but more, not very consistent defensively. More of an offensive player using quickness. Some of his defensive matchups didn't favor him, and he struggled. And so, does Arkansas, when it's looking at what it's going to try to do on the front line in the portal, I think you keep your eyes open, because I think Arkansas's working that. Typically, in any level of basketball, there are a lot more ready, talented guards and wings than there are big men. There just are. That's just how the numbers are. And so there's not as much of a pool. There's good ones in there, but it may be one of those situations where Arkansas goes through all of that and doesn't get something that it thinks is a value beyond what it can bring back. and how and what it's got going right now with the frontliners that we just mentioned. And so we'll keep an eye on that. BJ Mack, the 6'7" ish, 6'8" grad transfer from Wofford, All Southern Conference. He's got a visit scheduled. He's got Arkansas in his top 5. It was a top 10 or final 5 now, and he's got Arkansas scheduled for later this month. We'll see what plays out. I mentioned Hunter Dickinson. Arkansas has been working that one. A lot of schools are. That may be a reach, but it's something that they are still working on. And there's other names on there that we won't talk about today. But anybody that's asking about front line, those are things that I wanted to address at least a little bit, and say that I don't think Arkansas is ignoring that. I think they're working that angle as well. And I think there may be another backcourt piece in play here. There's some stuff that's going to be going on in the next 24 hours, more than just one thing. We'll see if another commitment emerges from it. I've been saying for a while, I felt like Arkansas on the low end would get 4 out of the portal, the high end 6, and maybe it would end up on 5 and land that way. And to this point, we're at 4, so we're getting close. And I just said the numbers are even as of today. If Jordan Walsh goes in, then that means Arkansas's got a spot to give. And if I'm saying they may add 1 or 2 more, well, if they add 2 more, that means someone who's in now and we think's coming back would need to go. Okay. Then the other part is, what if a Devo Davis or Jordan Wall? We don't know what Jordan's going to do in terms of how he's going to announce it, but I do believe he's going in. If that happens, does he leave the door cracked to come back? Is there a potential for he and Devo maybe to decide they want to come back? So all those things affect your numbers later. But Arkansas, when players are going to go into the pros, they get into that draft, they are no longer college eligible until they withdraw. They have to withdraw to get the scholarship back, to be back on scholarship, be part of the numbers. And they've got to have a landing spot. I don't think anybody would, in their right mind, thinks there wouldn't be a place back for a Devo or a Jordan Walsh if that was the determination later on. But that does affect roster numbers later if it does. But I think you have to recruit. I'm fully behind the idea that you got to go recruit and sign guys if you can to fill positions, because those are starters. Those are starter role players. You've got to do that. And so that kind of explains the numbers a little bit. That's why I don't talk in absolutes and go spend a whole lot of time. Well, these are the pristine numbers right now. Nothing is what we think it is or what most think it is right now, because the coaching staff and the players involved already know what processes they're in before it ever hits the public eye. And so where things really are is much different than what I could talk about. I've really kind of put a light on it. I mean, I've really come out and said it. I think Jordan Walsh is going to go test those waters, and that's the next opening, because you got to recruit as though a guy that's in that draft is now that's a roster spot that you need to go and fill. And so that's how it works. And there could, like I said, then you start wondering how that plays out later, but we're not even there yet, because as far as, anybody outside that building knows, Arkansas's numbers are even right now. So that's what it looks like on paper today. We went through Jeremiah Davenport. I hope you got something out of that, because I do think at 6'7", you lost Anthony Black, big point guard, 6'7". Nick Smith Jr., 6'5". Ricky Council, 6'6". Devo's a 6'4". So even though you had a couple of 6'5s and a 6'1", I thought Arkansas couldn't get small or quick enough in their backcourt last year, because they were big in the backcourt. And I think with Blocker coming in with his quickness and explosiveness at 6'2", 6'3-ish, with Minifield at 6'1", his length allows him to play with that length, that arm length. He can play a little taller, but he's also got quickness and explosion. So I think there's some quick twitch elements in this backcourt and starting to emerge. And even at 6'5", I think Mark is a guy that adds a little something athletically there. And, I go back to Battle and Davenport, and I think those guys, you're thinking more along, not as much about defense as you are helping Arkansas get better, shooting the ball, stretching the floor, spacing the floor, getting some defensive gravity so that guys can't just cheat and pack in and wait for everything Arkansas did last year. You had to get downhill to have success. There really wasn't shot creation anywhere else, and there wasn't good three-point shooting, nothing you could count on. And so defenses, it was easy. You had individual talent. You're like, well, how do our defenses? Well, because if everybody can really only do one thing well, it's easier for the defense to scheme, and it's easier to recover. You don't worry about closing on time as much, so you can sag everything in. So I think Arkansas is trying to have some diversity in this class, in this portal, on what guys can do, and then they can mix and match better based on matchups. I think last year was for Musselman. The other thing, obviously, when you're in the portal, you're getting more experience. Arkansas had 6 freshmen last year, 5 out of the portal. And I think, this year it's going to be more portal heavy. And I think there'll be more retention. I said it yesterday. There'll be more retention off of this roster part, whatever part of this roster is returning. There'll be more returnees, is what I'm trying to say, than you had a season ago. And that shouldn't be too hard to do, because he almost turned over the whole roster, 11 out of 13. The 2 prior years, it was more like half the roster, 6, 7. So I think this could go as high as 8. Maybe it lands at 7, but it's going to be closer to that half the roster than nearly all of it. And I think that's important too. I think some retention, some continuity, I think that mattered. I think that hurt Arkansas a little bit last year too. And let's not forget, as good as guys like Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr., even Jordan Wall, some of these freshmen, first-year players on that level. And I think Arkansas now, when you look at backcourt, there's going to be more experience in that backcourt, save for a guy like Blocker. But also, he's going to have a lot of older heads around him in that backcourt that have experience, and that may be able to help impart some stuff that helps him out. Certainly, that coaching staff, is going to be ready. So I think Arkansas, in some ways, with what they've done in the portal so far, it's been backcourt. It's going to be backcourt heavy no matter what. I just went through it. I think if 2 bigs become available, that means Arkansas feels like it struck gold if they bring in 2 bigs from the portal. That they felt like they struck gold and had to do it. Right now, the way it looks, I see maybe 1, and we'll see if that plays out. I think their intent to. And again, I think there may be another backcourt piece in the works. So we're going to wrap it up here. Is Swiss Musselman in the green room? Well, I don't have a green room, and I don't see Swiss. I was going to try to work him in today. I didn't get Swiss Musselman in yesterday. We ran out of time. We're going to run out of time again. If you can track him down, apologies. He'll watch this back later and hear me say it. All right, guys, good to be with you again. I enjoy this. You know it. It's basketball. Portal recruiting season is its own sport. We know that, so we can come on every day in an Eric Musselman era. Busy every day. So we'll see when the next announcement hits. Could be this weekend. It may take a little more time, but we'll see, and we'll catch up with you next time.